Hello everyone, today we're going to learn about a dark secret that even people are unaware of. You may believe you've seen it all on reality TV, but the people involved dared not disclose concerts, but you'd be surprised to learn what goes on behind the scenes. Picture an evening at the in 1975, Bob Hope received a specially designed golf club from the Dunes Hotel in Las Vegas. Placed up for auction, and that was only the start of a tale that nobody could have imagined. Bloody battles, secret schemes that no one could have predicted, and then Rick Harrison who, thanks to his keen wit and business sense, became well known on Pawn Stars and is currently resting in a jail hospital. Death was hardly a step away when he was stabbed in his own cell in a maximum security solitary confinement block, which was purported to be the prison's most strictly regulated section. There were no witnesses, no security cameras, and no weapons found. This wasn't your usual jail assault, but instead a meticulously planned incident in which everything was meticulously concealed, and only a few people are aware of this story. If you think it's intriguing, if not, use the number 0 in your comment. Otherwise, use the number 1. Remember to use the like button, tell your friends about this video, and let us know in the comments section below your opinions, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Alerts so you don't miss our upcoming thrilling videos. Let's get started on the narrative immediately. A few days later, Corey made a shocking revelation to the country. Someone wanted my father to pass away in order to keep him quiet, and why, given that Rick Harrison had secrets that might dismantle a clandestine network where the most influential figures conceal themselves behind goodwill. And before it happened, renowned Chumley Rick's lifelong pal had issued a terrifying warning. Occurred, they would immediately kill him if he spoke, and that warning proved to be completely. It's a serious topic for the public. Is Rick Harrison really the last alive link in this shadowy network, and if so, who is controlling the prison technique to guarantee he doesn't speak again? Is this a planned murder or merely the prelude to a much more sinister reality that will soon be exposed? Come along with us as we look for the answers in today's video. The unsettling state of affairs at the moment. Quiet when Rick Harrison was discovered on the chilly concrete floor of his cell F-12, lying in a pool of his own blood at 3 serious knife wounds in Black Ridge High Correctional Facility, 1 under the shoulder blades, 1 passing through his chest and 1 clipping his kidney. Prison medical officials say the inmate is critically hurt yet alive. What particularly perplexed investigators was the total lack of fundamental security precautions at the time of the attack. There were no operational security cameras in the vicinity, and no witnesses were present. Forward, no cries for assistance, no weapons found, and the most concerning information: inmates in the solitary confinement block did not report Rick Harrison, the man who had been talking non-stop before the TV. The cameras were suddenly totally quiet, not because he was mute, but rather because the nurses in the special care unit did not characterize him as unblinking hands holding the bed, eyes wide open, like a living ghost, unable or reluctant to communicate in writing or vocally. When questioned, he merely shook his head. Forensic psychologist with expertise in such deep quiet from high-risk inmates suggests a systemic threat, where the victim is aware that trying to talk could be lethal. Error made by the prison administrations. Consequently, the attack was being investigated, but at first it was classified as an internal matter. On the day of the attack, the 2 guards tasked with keeping watch noticed a troubling pattern behind the bureaucratic facade. Due to personal circumstances, employees without permanent positions were abruptly substituted for those over Block F. Mysteriously, motion detectors in cell F-112 and ongoing software issues caused the hallway cameras to malfunction. Noted no disruption. A number of unintentional failures such as this, according to the veteran prison investigators, point to a coordinated conspiracies. Why didn't Rick cry for assistance or set off the emergency alert in retaliation? The staff reports that he has a new scrape on his thumb, indicating a last-ditch effort to touch the call button without success. Reaction: if the criminal committed the crime alongside another prisoner in the event that an insider investigation verified that Rick's life had been the victim of, entrusted to those who are committed to keeping him silent forever. Rick Harrison's attacker is unknown, but everyone knows why. He had the deadly knowledge that to keep him quiet, someone was prepared to jeopardize the entire federal prison security system. Now, even though he stays alive, his silence still poses a risk, and the truth is sealed. Inside prison walls, within a weak body, where the enemy may be anyone, even Rick Harrison is no longer merely a defendant awaiting sentencing, according to those in official uniforms. He has become a living witness, which puts him in greater danger than before because the legal system cannot defend him. And inmates are unable to provide an explanation for the technical malfunctions. Only one person had the courage to speak up that fateful night, and that was his son. Corey Harrison, however, had to confront a life-or-death dilemma before he could divulge everything. Would his father be? Corey Harrison, the survivor, was gradually murdered as a result of prior transgressions or undiscovered facts. When the call arrived at 6:47 of the Truth AM, Corey Harrison was seated by himself with the coffee cup in his suburban kitchen. Undisturbed, the person on the other line merely stated, "One word: your dad was stabbed in jail and is in severe condition." There is no reason or information, just one knife. Heartbreaking injury. The son was still in shock about his father's life sentence. At that, Corey's realization that Chumley's warning wasn't only a crazy dream. Rick and Corey's old pal Chumley was sentenced months prior to Rick's sentencing. One late night, in the dimly lit store, Corey was brought aside by Pawn Stars. When he spoke, his voice was urgent. Corey tried to joke, but this was no longer a family play, and they would kill him. Believing his friend had been duped by a conspiracy hypothesis, but he knew differently after seeing his father's blood on the ground. Corey recalled that Rick had spoken of a meeting with government attorneys prior to the trial. He did not elaborate, but Rick's manner was not one of pleading for pity, but rather one of gambling. He warned me that everything might end soon, and Corey stated that was the wisest course of action for everyone. I assumed he planned to negotiate a reduced sentence, but these presumptions now seem pointless. Whatever Rick was about to reveal, or even just threatening to reveal, Corey realized had almost cost him his life, and Corey was accustomed to being in the spotlight at America's safest prison. Acclaimed as the youthful heir of Las Vegas' most well-known porn company, renowned for his astute bargaining abilities and memorable, humorous comments, but his self-assured demeanor disappeared when he sat in front of the camera following the stabbing. His eyes were damaged, but his voice was bolstered by resolve. "I used to trust without hesitation. My father acknowledged that. I believed he taught me right from wrong. However, I knew he was defending someone else, not me, when he turned to face me in court and said, 'It's okay, son.'" He started making connections between what he had. Rick had shut the office door for hours, but nobody ventured to dispute this. Rick had delivered Corey a hefty box, and late-night phone calls to dubious partners that no one in the organization could identify where Corey had repeatedly signed the signed contract for delivering artwork, and he now felt that he had inadvertently. The entire underground organization is fueled by legally dirty money. Then Chumley reappeared with just one alibi and no media leaks. "Keep this Chumley item," a little USB drive wrapped in aluminum foil murmured. "Open it if you feel like you're being followed." Corey, or if he disappears, had written it off as paranoia, but he didn't think twice after learning about the stabbing. An encrypted file containing bank accounts, travel logs, emails, and pictures was on the drive. And the most damning evidence is a list of influential people who have been connected to Rick Harrison either directly or indirectly. Names like Jay-Z, Oprah Winfrey, Tom Hanks, and Steve Harvey instantly jumped out, but there were other media directors of NOS International, charity executives, and even 2 former U.S. Department of Justice authorities. At that moment, Corey understood that his father had been more than simply found guilty. Rick was a crucial component of a media-wide network for personal transgressions. Fields of foreign aid and entertainment, and when Rick paused, he hinted that very mechanism raised concerns about his potential cooperation. The cost to pay. Corey was uncertain about Rick's prognosis and whether he could shield his family from what was about to occur, but there was one indisputable fact: his father's secrets had been in danger for years, and now that they were out, they had becoming lethal, and that the biggest danger now was quiet. In a subsequent interview, Corey stated, "I am not a hero, rather, I am the son of a hero who turned to crime. However, if I remain silent, no one will." Everything changed then. A tale of a TV personality who had fallen from grace had made Rick Harrison the focal point of a huge indictment, but his safety now hinged on the words he had never having the opportunity to speak. The USB drive was the lethal silent proof. That Chumlee had handed to Corey Harrison initially appeared to be a pointless tiny item concealed in a drawer, wrapped in crumpled foil and lacking a ribbon, but Corey's survival instincts took over after Rick was stabbed while incarcerated, and he chose to open it. And when his laptop screen flickered, he noticed something more complicated than suspicion. It was evidence, but not the kind of evidence you would find in a courtroom. So perilous that anyone found in possession of it could vanish into thin air. Drift Protocol 13 was the sinister title of the drive's top folder. Subfolders were well organized, Wi-Fi logs were secured, and facial recognition was confirmed. Corey sat in the room with cold backup audio recordings and recognition partner database lists. A framed picture of his father grinning confidently in a scene from a movie was displayed on the wall with a subtle, black glow. Once hanged on a porn star TV broadcast, the picture now chokes. Numerous coded conversations between Rick and him were contained in the encrypted emails. Anonymous addresses. Despite the fact that the identities were removed, the writing style used special symbols and technical terminology showed a well-developed media network where the locations of shipments, landings and third-level security codes were unrelated to currency or antiques. One message said, "Verify the IS-1 child's appearance." Before the third cycle, Lot 3 checks movement with a cover. IS-1 was identified by the FBI as Isla Iona, which is thought to be a hub for people trafficking. The DB encounters the most terrifying continents in a worldwide network. Dozens of pictures of young faces, usually teenagers, taken in poorly lit spaces. Each portrait had an identification code beneath it, along with dead eyes. CB013THM4JC Cycle 5, a few compliance observations. The destination compounds emotional training levels because he couldn't bear to stare any longer. Corey shut down the laptop, took out the HDD, and securely stored it, yet 1,000 questions rushed through his head. Did his father preserve a copy, or had Rick disclosed this information? This is precisely why he was targeted. Not only for his actions but also for his knowledge, and if Rick mentioned renown, Corey understood that wealth and influence may all disappear after the stabbing. And although jail may not be a concern, the last conclusion following Corey's anonymous delivery of a copy of the disk to a team of investigators when the wireless logs were deciphered, journalists discovered at least 17 transfers from Sean Carter Foundation entities in Beast are matched by an account with the label SCF. And ST Kits, along with a $870,000 payment designated as logistical growth for young people. Another note stated, "Procked through RH shell verified by." Without fully deciphering the of circle, the reporters discovered a reality that went beyond Rick Harrison. It was a series of political celebrities, global shipping companies, entertainment NGOs, and organizations. Rick was only a go-between who knew too much, owned too much, and was too near the nexus of crime and money. Even worse, he lost control of this knowledge that Corey had taken, and if this as word got out, Corey, the only son, would be the next. Corey later acknowledged that he was unsure on what to do with the USB and sent it to the FBI because he thought nobody would give it away to the media, putting himself and his family at jeopardy. Choice was risking his life, but he was aware that they didn't want my dad alive since he was able to speak. But if I remain silent, everything will perish with him. And those individuals will leave as though nothing had occurred. The numbers wasn't what Corey was most afraid about itself, but the overwhelming lack of response, threats, or public offers from those who could hold him responsible. The most obvious response he received when he sent a test email to one of the addresses on the disk was their silence. we understand what you have, and we're keeping an eye on it. Since then, Corey has increased his family's protection. For protection, he hired attorneys and sent his kid to live with his mother. Nonetheless, he was aware that if his father was attacked before he said, "I'll be next," since I can now tell him that USB is a ticking time bomb. Once the quintessential American icon and dependable television personality, Rick Harrison is now struggling to survive, and Corey was standing in the jail infirmary, uncertain if he would ever wake up. Pushed into the position of an unwilling witness at the intersection of crime and truth. Entrusted with safeguarding funds sufficient to topple a decades-old political system, Rick Harrison was aware of the reasons for their actions. To comprehend why Rick's life was silenced, we must confront Rick was more than just a participant. He knew too much, which was a simple but sad truth. The linchpins function in a global network of human trafficking and money laundering that gathers hundreds more than 10 years' worth of leads and thousands of details. Despite not being the mastermind, he was a witness who had direct knowledge of what he possessed. Wasn't only proof in court, but intelligence that could destroy the liberties, careers, and reputations of the most influential people in the peak of their power. Among the records Corey, the list of partners Rick had coded in his private notes was made public. Since then, independent investigators have decrypted some of these acronyms. JZF connects to Oprah's Jay-Z, matches Shaw Carter's foundation with references to financial transfers from Cyprus to Greece that took place at the same time as the enigmatic grant of honorary Greek citizenship to SH Media Payment Production, and Tom Hanks transferred via Steve Harvey-affiliated Mayfield Holdings the operations of other NAS in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean regions were also included in this work network. Inadequate immigration regulations and financial monitoring, manipulative aid allocation, education grants, and summer camps for humanitarian purposes were euphemisms for the trafficking of women, children, and live assets. Every transaction from, for example, these well-known charity funds were carefully documented. From SCF, $470,000 was moved under the logistics heading for the exchange. Additional $310,000 from Oprah Youth Vision for young talent, carrying remarks that were clear on the facilitator's licensing for the island-based Assured IS-1 contributions, but finished commercial payments with instructions for route annotations and assigned personnel. Rick was seen writing to an unnamed recipient in a leaked email that was recovered from Corey's USB address associated with a Los Angeles-based talent agency. TH and Jay-Z had verified that RH would take care of the subsequent shipment, which was scheduled to arrive in the camp by the 12th. Logistics. This statement demonstrated that Rick did more than only maintain the finances. He planned and carried out activities, and crucially, he was able to describe every detail about every person in the chain. Rick Harrison was not a washed-up porn star, thus he posed a threat to others who were still hiding. He was someone who had almost been forgotten and a true menace. According to a source close to Rick, when Rick suggested to investigators that he would exchange information for a reduced sentence, that he had even asked to meet with a Department of Homeland Security official in private. Avoiding the FBI to provide over VIP information and account lists in return for home arrest for medical reasons, but prior to that meeting, he was stabbed. Rick was betrayed by someone who is not tolerated in the jail society. His former associates, friends, and VIP clients were outside of SE's prison, not his fellow prisoners, which had a section marked Court Clearance List, with a warning that it will never must appear in court unless RH consents, as stated in that one entry. All as the press concentrated on Rick's scandal, and the public only witnessed a criminal. The system he worked for remained refined, quiet, and robust. Rick managed the network rather than building it, and like any operation, those who comprehend its workings are also capable of destroying it. The man holding the actual commander behind prison might be a music producer, even though the knife in Rick's cell may have belonged to an inmate. A human rights speaker, TV host, or movie star all have the same goal: remove the secrets that Rick Harrison almost revealed aloud. Rick may or may not have intended to reveal everything, but in their opinion, the risk was too great. Additionally, One rule remains constant throughout all dark networks: no one is permitted to shed. Rick Harrison is still alive today, but beneath the shadow of continuous monitoring, isolation, and the possibility of silence, and Corey, now that he knows everything, he must make the hardest choice of his life: keep quiet. And either live or do something to become the next. They didn't stab my father because of his past, Target Corey previously stated. Stabbed him since he might represent the truth's future. This brutal fact made everyone, including jail guards, if Rick were alive would he dare to speak, is a question that journalists should consider. Rick Harrison was able to prevent crime without leaving a trace when there were no cameras. Many believe that he had been stabbed in his F-12 cell at Black Ridge Correctional Facility. Was simply the foreseeable brutality of a prominent prison sentence. A famous person in prison for human trafficking was a prime target for retaliation, but the attack that morning lacked any indication of an unplanned attack. No roving guards, no surveillance cameras, no yelling in the hallway, just a rudimentary plastic knife handle was never discovered. All evidence suggested a well-planned execution. When it was discovered,